The champagne flute trembled in Zara's hand as she stood at the edge of the marble terrace, watching her husband's family toast to her absence. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Hampton estate, she could see them, Richard's mother clutching her pearls, his sister laughing too loudly, his father raising his glass with that same condescending smile he'd perfected over 3 years of marriage. To freedom, she heard Margaret Blackwell declare, her voice carrying across the manicured gardens. Now Richard can finally find someone appropriate. The word hit like a physical blow. Appropriate. As if Zara's Harvard MBA, her fluency in 4 languages, her work building schools in underserved communities meant nothing beside the color of her skin. The ocean breeze lifted her silk dress, the same midnight blue one Richard had bought her for their anniversary, back when he still looked at her like she hung the stars. Now it felt like armor she was about to shed. Her phone buzzed. A text from the family lawyer, Mrs. Blackwell. The prenup review meeting is tomorrow at 9 a.m. Please bring all documentation. Zara's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. She'd spent the last 6 months since Richard's request for space preparing for this moment. The Blackwells thought they knew exactly how this divorce would play out, the poor black woman walking away with a modest settlement, grateful for their generosity. They had no idea she'd been 3 moves ahead since the day Margaret first called her the help at their engagement party. Another buzz. This time, a different number. The transfer is complete. Welcome to your new life, Zed. Zara's heart stuttered. After 18 months of secret meetings, coded messages, and stolen glances across boardrooms, Rowan Chen had finally made his move. The tech billionaire who'd been quietly buying up Richard's failing investments, the man who saw her brilliance when her own husband had grown blind to it, the one person who'd whispered you deserve everything and meant it. She turned away from the window, her reflection ghost-like in the glass. Tomorrow, the Blackwells would learn that the burden they'd so desperately wanted gone had just become their biggest nightmare. But tonight, she had a mansion to pack and a heart to decide whether it was ready to trust again. Zara Adana Williams Blackwell had learned early that being exceptional wasn't enough, you had to be undeniable. Growing up in Detroit with a nurse mother and teacher father, she'd watched them work twice as hard for half the recognition. So she'd made herself bulletproof, valedictorian, full scholarship to Harvard, top of her MBA class, and a consulting career that had Fortune 500 CEOs calling her directly. Richard had seemed different when they met at a charity gala 5 years ago. The golden boy heir to Blackwell Industries had pursued her with the intensity of a man unaccustomed to hearing no. He'd listened to her ideas about sustainable business practices, claimed to love her passion for social justice, and for 2 years, she'd believed he truly saw her. But marriage had revealed the truth. Richard wanted a trophy wife, not a partner. The microaggressions started small, questioning her clothing choices for family events, suggesting she tone down her intelligence at dinner parties, gradually freezing her out of business conversations. The final blow came when she'd pitched a revolutionary educational technology platform to his board, only to watch him present her ideas as his own the following week. Now, 18 months later, Rowan Chen represented everything Richard wasn't. The 34-year-old tech mogul had built his empire from nothing, valued innovation over pedigree, and treated Zara like the brilliant strategist she was. Their professional relationship had begun when his company acquired one of Richard's struggling ventures. Zara had negotiated the deal, impressing Rowan with her sharp instincts and ethical framework. Their connection had been immediate but careful. Late-night strategy sessions, encrypted messages about business deals, stolen conversations at industry events. Rowan never made her feel like she had to dim her light. Instead, he challenged her to shine brighter. Her best friend Maya had noticed the change months ago. "You're different around him," she'd observed during one of their monthly brunches. "You're yourself again." But Richard's family saw only threat. Margaret Blackwell, with her old money snobbery and thinly veiled racism, had spent 3 years undermining Zara's confidence with 1,000 tiny cuts. Richard's sister Jennifer treated her like an exotic pet, while his father Conrad simply acted as though she didn't exist unless absolutely necessary. The breaking point had come 6 months ago at the Blackwell Foundation Gala. Zara had organized the entire event, raising a record-breaking $12 million for education initiatives. But when the local news wanted to interview the foundation's leadership, Margaret had literally stepped in front of Zara, claiming credit for inspiring the vision. That night, Richard hadn't defended her. He'd simply shrugged and said, "You know how Mother is." The next morning, Zara had called her lawyer and begun documenting everything. The prenup meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. sharp. Zara arrived at the law offices of Morrison & Associates wearing her power suit, the charcoal gray one that made her feel invincible. Richard was already there with his legal team, flanked by his parents like he was still 12 years old. "Zara," Richard stood, attempting his old charm. "You look beautiful as always." She took her seat across from him, noting how his hairline had receded in the past year, how his eyes no longer held the warmth that had first attracted her. "Let's begin." The Blackwell lawyer, a silver-haired man named Patterson, cleared his throat. "Mrs. Blackwell, as outlined in your prenuptial agreement, you're entitled to a settlement of $200,000 and the apartment in the city. We're prepared to add an additional $50,000 as a gesture of goodwill." Margaret smiled, that thin-lipped expression Zara knew so well. "I think that's quite generous, considering the circumstances." "What circumstances would those be, Margaret?" Zara's voice was perfectly level. "Well, dear, the marriage simply didn't work out. These things happen when people are from such different backgrounds." Zara felt her lawyer, David Kim, tense beside her. They'd prepared for this moment meticulously. She opened her briefcase and placed a thick folder on the table. "Actually, I have some documents I'd like to review first." She slid papers across the mahogany surface. "David, would you explain the contents?" Richard frowned. "Zara, what is this?" David cleared his throat. "These are financial records showing that Mrs. Blackwell's consulting work generated approximately $4 to $7 million in revenue for Blackwell Industries during the course of the marriage. Revenue that was never properly attributed to her contributions." Patterson's face went pale. "I'm sorry, what?" "Furthermore," Zara continued, her voice growing stronger, "there's the matter of intellectual property theft. The educational platform concept that Blackwell Industries is currently developing, the one projected to be worth $800 million, was originally my creation. I have time-stamped emails, recorded meeting transcripts, and witness testimony to prove it." Richard's mouth opened and closed like a fish. You can't prove." "Actually, I can." Zara's smile was razor-sharp. "Including the meeting where you explicitly told me to let the men handle the business side, while you took my proposal and presented it as your own innovation." The room fell silent except for the ticking of an antique clock. Margaret's face had gone ashen. "Oh, and there's one more thing." Zara placed a final document on the table. "I'm not requesting a settlement. I'm claiming my rightful share of the marital assets I helped create, plus damages for intellectual property theft. My legal team estimates this at approximately $200 million. Conrad Blackwell spoke for the first time. "You can't be serious." "Dead serious. You see, while you all spent the last 3 years treating me like an inconvenient charity case, I was building an ironclad legal foundation. Every dismissive comment, every stolen idea, every act of financial manipulation, I documented it all." Richard looked like he might be sick. "Zara, please. We can work something out. You know I never meant." "Never meant what, Richard?" "To steal my work. To let your family humiliate me. To ask for a divorce because I was becoming an embarrassment to your political aspirations." The last accusation hung in the air like smoke. Richard's eyes darted to his parents, confirming what Zara had suspected all along. "I'll see you in court," she said, standing gracefully. "Oh, and Richard, you might want to check your investment portfolio. I hear there have been some interesting developments." The news broke 3 days later. Blackwell Industries faces major buyout as tech mogul acquires controlling interest. The business journals couldn't get enough of the story, the mysterious acquisition that had happened right under the family's noses, the shell companies and strategic purchases that had slowly transferred power away from the Blackwells. Zara read the headlines from her suite at the Four Seasons, sipping coffee and watching the sunrise paint Manhattan gold. Her phone had been ringing non-stop since the story broke, but she'd only answered one call. "Are you proud of yourself?" Richard's voice had been raw with exhaustion. "I'm proud of finally standing up for myself," she'd replied calmly. "Something I should have done years ago." Now, 48 hours later, she was preparing for the most important meeting of her life. Rowan had requested to see her at his penthouse office, their first face-to-face conversation since the acquisition became public. The elevator ride to the 50th floor felt endless. When the doors opened, Rowan was waiting, and for a moment, they simply looked at each other. He was taller than she remembered, his dark eyes intense behind wire-rimmed glasses. The perfectly tailored suit couldn't hide the tension in his shoulders. "Hello, Zara." "Rowan." Her voice caught slightly on his name. "Congratulations on your acquisition." He gestured toward the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Walk with me. They moved to his office, a minimalist space filled with natural light and elegant technology. The silence stretched between them, heavy with 18 months of careful professional distance and carefully hidden longing. I need you to know, he said finally, that every move I made was legitimate. I never used inside information from our conversations. I know. She turned to face him fully. You're too honorable for that. Am I? His laugh was bitter. I bought out your husband's company while falling in love with his wife. I'm not sure honor factors into it. The words hung between them like a bridge neither was ready to cross. The Blackwells think I orchestrated this for revenge, Zara said quietly. They think I'm some manipulative gold digger who seduced you for your money. And what do you think? She met his gaze steadily. I think we've been dancing around something real for 18 months, and now we finally have the freedom to decide what that means. Rowan stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. It means everything changes. The press, the speculation, the assumption that you left your husband for his richer replacement. Let them think what they want. Zara's voice was stronger than she felt. I didn't leave Richard for you, Rowan. I left him for me. The fact that you might be part of my future, that's something entirely separate. His hand reached out, fingers barely touching hers. And if I want you to be part of mine. Before she could answer, his assistant knocked on the door. Mr. Chen, the Blackwell legal team is here for the emergency meeting. The spell broke. Reality crashed back in. The lawsuits, the media circus, the complicated mess of business and heart that they'd created together. We should talk about this later, Zara said, stepping back. When we're not in the middle of destroying my ex-husband's empire. Rowan's smile was soft and dangerous. Are we destroying it? Or are we building something better? The emergency meeting was a disaster for the Blackwells. Gathered in Rowan's conference room, the family looked like they'd aged a decade in the past week. Richard's usual confidence had crumbled into desperate pleading, Margaret clutched her purse like a shield, and Conrad's bluster had deflated into weary resignation. You have to understand, Richard was saying, his voice cracking. Blackwell Industries has been in our family for 4 generations. You can't just tear it apart. Rowan sat at the head of the table, perfectly composed. I'm not tearing anything apart, Richard. I'm restructuring a failing company. Your profit margins have been declining for 3 years, your employee satisfaction ratings are abysmal, and your innovation pipeline is virtually empty. That's not. We were implementing new strategies. Strategies that Zara developed, Rowan interrupted smoothly. The same strategies you've been taking credit for while systematically excluding her from leadership decisions. Zara watched from her position near the windows, technically present as a consultant but emotionally invested as a woman finally seeing justice served. The irony wasn't lost on her. For 3 years, she'd sat in meetings like this being ignored or dismissed. Now she was the most powerful person in the room. Margaret's voice was ice cold. I suppose you think this is all very clever, dear. Seducing a billionaire to get revenge on us. Actually, Rowan said before Zara could respond, I need to clarify something. He stood, moving to a presentation screen. The acquisition of Blackwell Industries began 26 months ago, long before I met Zara. The room went silent. I'd been tracking your company's decline for years. The educational technology sector was ripe for consolidation, and Blackwell was the obvious weak link. I started buying shares through shell companies in early 2022. Richard's face went white. That's impossible. We would have noticed. You were too busy playing golf and attending charity galas to notice much of anything. Rowan's voice was perfectly professional, but Zara could hear the steel underneath. I owned 15% of your company before I ever shook your wife's hand. Conrad finally spoke. Then why? What does she have to do with any of this? Rowan looked directly at Zara, and something passed between them, a recognition, a truth that had been building for months. I fell in love with the woman you all treated like hired help, he said simply. And in the process, I discovered that she was the only person in your entire organization with actual vision and integrity. The confession hung in the air like a challenge. Zara's heart hammered against her ribs. So you see, Rowan continued, turning back to the Blackwells, this was never about revenge. This was about recognizing value where others couldn't, or wouldn't. Zara just happened to be the most valuable asset your family ever possessed, and you threw her away. Margaret's mask finally slipped. How dare you? How dare I what? Fall in love with an extraordinary woman? See her brilliance when her own husband was blind to it. Rowan's composure cracked slightly. Your son had everything, wealth, privilege, and a partner who could have helped him build an empire. Instead, he chose mediocrity and prejudice. Richard stood abruptly. I won't sit here and be lectured about my marriage by the man who saw what you couldn't. Zara's voice cut across the room like a blade. She'd been silent long enough. Rowan didn't steal me, Richard. You lost me. Every day, with every dismissive comment, every time you made me feel small. You lost me long before I ever knew Rowan existed. The truth settled over them like dust after an explosion. In the silence, Zara realized something had shifted irrevocably, not just in the room, but in her heart. This wasn't just about business anymore. This was about love and choice, and the courage to claim both. Rowan's eyes found hers across the conference table, and in them she saw her own reflection. Not the diminished version the Blackwells had created, but the woman she truly was. Powerful. Deserving. Loved. The media firestorm that followed was unlike anything Zara had experienced. Within hours of the meeting, leaked details of the acquisition and divorce proceedings were splashed across business journals and gossip blogs alike. The narrative wrote itself. Scorned wife seduces billionaire for revenge, destroying family empire in the process. Zara's phone buzzed constantly with interview requests, none of which she granted. Instead, she watched from her hotel suite as the story spiraled beyond her control. Gold digger or genius? The Zara Williams Blackwell story. From welfare to wealth, how one woman brought down an American dynasty. The Blackwell acquisition, love story or corporate revenge. The headlines made her stomach turn. Worse were the comments sections, filled with racist vitriol and sexist assumptions about her motives. Every insecurity she'd buried during her marriage came roaring back. Was she really the brilliant strategist she believed herself to be, or just an opportunist who'd gotten lucky? The breaking point came during a call with Maya. You need to see this, her best friend said, her voice tight with anger. Margaret Blackwell gave an interview to Vanity Fair. It goes live tomorrow. Zara closed her eyes. How bad? She's painting you as a calculating manipulator who targeted Richard specifically for his wealth, then orchestrated the entire acquisition to maximize your divorce settlement. She's got sources backing up claims about your aggressive behavior and concerning relationship with Rowan. The words hit like physical blows. Zara sank into the hotel room's plush chair, suddenly exhausted. 3 years of fighting the Blackwell narrative, and Margaret had found a way to poison the well one final time. There's more, Maya continued reluctantly. Richard's doing the morning show circuit. His not defending you, Zara. His letting them think the worst. That night, Zara couldn't sleep. She stood at her window overlooking Central Park, watching the city lights blur through tears she refused to let fall. Had she been naive to think she could win against people with this much power and influence? Had she misjudged everything, including Rowan's feelings? Her phone buzzed with a text from him. *We need to talk. The message felt ominous. Zara's throat tightened as she imagined the conversation, Rowan realizing that association with her was damaging his reputation, choosing his business interests over whatever they'd built together. She'd seen it before with Richard, the slow retreat when the cost of loving her became too high. She spent the night drafting her resignation from the consulting contract with his company, preparing herself for the inevitable conversation where he'd ask her to step back, to disappear quietly while the media storm passed. By dawn, she'd convinced herself that the confession of love had been strategic, a powerful man protecting a valuable asset. Nothing more. When room service brought her morning coffee, the newspaper was folded beside the cup. The headline made her blood freeze. Chen Enterprises stock plummets as Blackwell scandal deepens. The article detailed how investors were spooked by the acquisition's messy personal entanglements, how board members were questioning Rowan's judgment, how the entire deal might unravel if the media circus continued. Zara closed her eyes, finally understanding the true cost of her revenge. She hadn't just destroyed the Blackwells, she'd potentially ruined the one man who'd ever truly seen her worth. Her phone rang. Rowan's name appeared on the screen. She stared at it for 3 rings before sending it to voicemail, unable to bear hearing him choose his empire over her heart. The letter arrived at her hotel that evening, hand-delivered by a courier. Zara recognized Rowan's handwriting on the envelope, her name written in bold, certain strokes. She held it for 20 minutes before finding the courage to open it. *Zara**. *Since you won't take my calls, I'm hoping you'll read this. **. I know what the press is saying. I know what the board is pressuring me to do. I know you're probably convinced that I'm about to choose my business over you, because that's what Richard did. That's what men like him always do. Asterisk. Asterisk, but I'm not Richard. Asterisk. Asterisk 26 months ago, I started acquiring Blackwell Industries because I saw a failing company ripe for improvement. But 12 months ago, I met you, and everything changed. Not my business plan. That stayed exactly the same. What changed was my understanding of what success actually means. Asterisk. Asterisk, for the past 18 months, I've watched you navigate a world that consistently underestimates you. I've seen your brilliance dismissed, your contributions minimized, your worth questioned by people who couldn't match your intelligence on their best day. And through it all, you never lost your integrity or your compassion. Asterisk. Asterisk, the media can paint whatever narrative they want. My board can threaten whatever consequences they choose. Because here's what I know, you are the smartest, most ethical, most extraordinary person I've ever met. And if loving you costs me everything else, then everything else wasn't worth having. Asterisk. Asterisk, I'm not asking you to choose me over your independence. I'm not asking you to become someone smaller to make my life easier. I'm asking you to let me prove that love doesn't have to diminish you. It can elevate you. Asterisk. Asterisk, meet me tomorrow at 8 p.m. You know where. Asterisk. Asterisk, yours entirely. Asterisk. Asterisk, Rowan. Asterisk. Asterisk P.S. I've called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. It's time they understood that some things are more important than stock prices. Asterisk. Zara read the letter 3 times, her hands shaking with each pass. The hotel room suddenly felt too small, the walls pressing in on her racing thoughts. She moved to the window, looking out at the city that had become her battleground. For so long, she'd believed that love meant making herself smaller. Richard had taught her that lesson thoroughly. Dim your light, soften your voice, become what others need you to be. Even her parents, loving as they were, had warned her to be twice as good and half as threatening. But Rowan was offering something different. Not just love, but partnership. Not just acceptance, but celebration. Her phone buzzed with a text from Maya. Asterisk, have you seen the news? Chen Enterprises stock is actually UP today. Apparently some major investor published an op-ed about Rowan's visionary leadership and the unprecedented value of the Blackwell acquisition. The market is responding positively. Asterisk. Another text followed immediately. Asterisk, the investor was anonymous, but word is it's someone with serious Wall Street credibility. The tide is turning. Z. Asterisk. Zara smiled for the first time in days. She had a feeling she knew exactly who that anonymous investor was, and it wasn't Rowan. It was someone who'd been watching this whole drama unfold with the calculating eye of a woman who'd spent decades building her own empire. Her phone rang. This time, she answered. Hello, Mother. Zara Adana Williams. Her mother's voice was warm with pride and sharp with protective fury. I think it's time I had a conversation with some people about my brilliant daughter. And tomorrow, I think it's time you had a conversation with that young man who's been smart enough to fall in love with you. For the first time in months, Zara felt hope bloom in her chest like sunrise. The restaurant was empty except for them. Rowan had reserved the entire rooftop terrace of Le Bernardin, fairy lights twinkling against the Manhattan skyline like captured stars. Zara arrived exactly at 8, wearing the midnight blue dress, not because it was armor this time, but because it made her feel beautiful. He was waiting at a table set for 2, still in his business suit but with his tie loosened, looking like a man who'd spent the day fighting wars. When he saw her, his entire expression softened. You came. I almost didn't. She settled into the chair across from him, noting how his hands trembled slightly as he poured wine. Tell me about your board meeting. Rowan's smile was rueful. I told them they could accept my personal life or find a new CEO. Turns out they are not quite ready to lose me over stock price fluctuations. And if they had been, then I would have walked away. He leaned forward, his eyes intense. Zara, I need you to understand something. I've spent my entire adult life building that company. It's been my identity, my purpose, my everything. But these past few days, imagining a future without you in it, nothing else mattered. The confession hung between them, vulnerable and raw. I got your letter, she said quietly. And I've been thinking about what you wrote. About love not diminishing me. And Richard used to tell me I was too much. Too ambitious, too opinionated, too independent. I spent 3 years trying to become less, and I lost myself in the process. She met his gaze steadily. I can't do that again. Not even for you. I would never ask you to. Rowan reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. Zara, the woman I fell in love with, is the one who rebuilt educational systems in underserved communities. The one who increased Blackwell's profit margins by 30% in 2 years. The one who had the courage to document every injustice and fight back when it mattered most. Why would I want you to be anyone else? Because loving me is complicated. There will always be people who question your motives, who assume I'm using you, who think you could do better with someone more appropriate. The word tasted bitter in her mouth, but Rowan's expression hardened with resolve. Let them think whatever they want. You know what I see when I look at you. He stood, moving around the table to kneel beside her chair. I see the future. Not just mine, ours. I see the company we could build together, the changes we could make, the family we could create. I see a woman who challenges me to be better every single day. From his jacket pocket, he pulled out a small velvet box. Zara's breath caught. This isn't about replacing what you had with Richard, he said, opening the box to reveal a stunning emerald surrounded by diamonds. This isn't about proving anything to anyone else. This is about two people who found each other in the middle of a war zone and decided to build something beautiful together. The ring caught the light like fire and hope combined. Zara felt tears she'd been holding back for months finally spill over. Rowan. Marry me, he said simply. Not because it makes business sense or because it's convenient or because you need someone to take care of you. Marry me because we're better together than apart. Because I want to spend the rest of my life watching you change the world. For a moment, the weight of everything, the divorce, the media circus, the uncertain future, pressed down on her shoulders. But then she looked at Rowan's face, at the man who'd seen her worth when she'd forgotten it herself, and the answer became clear. Yes, she whispered, then stronger, yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger with hands that shook slightly, then stood to pull her into his arms. The kiss was soft at first, then deeper, carrying 18 months of careful restraint and infinite possibility. When they broke apart, the city sparkled below them like a promise. So what happens now? She asked, her hands fisted in his shirt. Now we go home. We plan a wedding. We build an empire that actually means something. He smiled against her hair. And we let the Blackwells read about our happiness in Forbes. Zara laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. You know they'll never forgive us. Good, Rowan said, spinning her around the empty terrace. I wasn't looking for their forgiveness. I was looking for forever. 6 months later. The wedding was held at the Foundry in Long Island City, with Manhattan glittering across the water like scattered diamonds. Zara had chosen the venue specifically because it was everything the Blackwell Hampton estate wasn't: industrial, modern, filled with artists and innovators instead of old money and older prejudices. She walked down the aisle in a custom gown that made her feel like royalty, Maya beside her as maid of honor, her parents beaming in the front row. Rowan waited at the altar in a perfectly tailored tux, his expression soft with wonder as she approached. The ceremony was small but powerful, filled with friends who'd supported them through the media storm and colleagues who'd witnessed their partnership evolve into something extraordinary. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the cheers echoed across the water. During the reception, Zara's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. She almost ignored it, then recognized Richard's new contact information. Congratulations. You deserved better than I gave you. I hope you're happy. She showed Rowan, who read it with raised eyebrows. Unexpected. People change, Zara said, then deleted the message without responding. Some chapters were meant to stay closed. The real surprise came during the toast. Maya stood with champagne glass raised, her voice carrying across the crowd, to Zara and Rowan, who proved that the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies, it's building a life so beautiful they can't touch it. As guests laughed and applauded, Zara caught sight of a familiar figure near the entrance. Margaret Blackwell stood in the shadows, uninvited but somehow present, watching with an expression Zara couldn't quite read. For a moment, their eyes met across the crowded room. Margaret nodded once, not quite an apology, but perhaps an acknowledgement, then disappeared into the night. She came, Rowan murmured in Zara's ear. She did. Zara turned back to her husband, her new life, her chosen future. But she doesn't get to stay. Later, as they swayed together on the dance floor to Etta James crooning about At Last, Rowan whispered, Any regrets? Zara looked around at the celebration, at her parents laughing with Rowan's siblings, at Maya flirting with the best man, at the life they'd built from the ashes of her old one. The emerald on her finger caught the light, throwing rainbows across the dance floor. "Just one," she said, smiling up at him. "I regret waiting so long to choose myself first." Everything else was just inevitable. The music swelled around them as Manhattan sparkled across the water, witness to a love story that had begun with heartbreak and ended with transformation. In the morning, they'd start their honeymoon in Bali, then return to build the educational technology empire that would change thousands of lives. But tonight, they simply held each other and danced, two people who'd found in each other exactly what they'd been searching for all along, not just love, but the courage to claim it completely. The Blackwells had called her a burden. Instead, she'd become a legacy. What would your perfect revenge look like? Destruction, or building something so beautiful your enemies can't touch it?